What's up, world? It's your boy Trey, retro_GT, back for another episode of G.Taylor Show. Hope that you're having an amazing week and a weekend. It's January flying by really quickly. Listen, man, like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Let me know what you think. We had a few recent episodes in the last few weeks. Road to DSW, Part 5, final semester, rural beginnings. Then I did an episode about my sneakers, all my favorite pickups from 2025. Then I did something around grief and loss from the holidays, and then also athlete mental health. So it's 4 new episodes out there that you can tap in with, listen to, and have, share with somebody, let them know what you got going on. I know it seems kind of all over the place, but I promise they all make sense because it's all about what I like to do and encourage, but also how it intersects with my life. That's what the G.Taylor Show is all about. Sports, sneakers, cars, coffee, social work, mental health, well-being, you name it. That's what makes up this actual show. So yeah, man. So make sure you like, share, subscribe. Make sure you tell somebody about the episodes. We're on YouTube, as well as all your digital streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that streams podcasts, we should be on it. So yeah, man, let me know. Let me up. Trying to get my followers up, man. My subscribers is low. I need my subscribers higher than what it is at this point. So yeah, man, I kind of want to do talk about a couple of different things tonight. One that's very important to my heart is the aspect of reintroducing myself to the world for new followers and those who have not been with me from day one journey of this podcast, from this time I started podcasting back in 2016, 2017, to the time I started in social work, graduating in 2015, to everything else, uphold, you name it, mental health, you name it. So I want to kind of do a reintroduction to who I am and what my work is all about. So again, my name is Gary Trey Taylor, licensed clinical social worker. I'm in the state of Virginia, Caroline County to be exact. I know if you've been around Caroline, Richmond, Fredericksburg, anywhere in Virginia, if you know where King's Dominion and that's where pretty much I would say I'm from in Caroline aspect. So I've lived here, born, raised, still live here, and I enjoy my rural hometown. I will also be the first one to speak up about issues in my rural hometown, but I also enjoy my rural hometown. I remember when we didn't have a food line on the other side of Ladysmith, or we didn't have any of our subdivisions where it was just trees. I remember going to, Walmart on Route 3 versus 4 Mile Fork. So I've shown my age a little bit, but that's part of my journey, my process. And so I every time I tell my story about, the amount of stoplights, we didn't have internet, things like that for quite some time, high-speed internet, and some people still don't have high-speed internet right in the county. But anytime I tell people about that, they always, oh my God, what? So yeah, man. So listen, I've born and raised, I played basketball for a little bit, love basketball, still love basketball. I mean, if any point in time NBA wants to come calling for me to play or to do some wellness type stuff, please let me know. Big into that. Started playing ball at 5 years old, played AAU basketball, met a lot of great people along the way, played against some famous folks that went to the league or went to college basketball. That's always been my passion. I did do some coaching in the rec league aspect. I would love to do coaching at the AAU aspect, or, maybe collegiate, not maybe collegiate, I'm sorry, like high school sports, something like that. However, that I don't know if that's in the cards at this point. So yeah, man. So I went to, I stopped playing ball. I actually quit my senior year. So that's one thing. Quit my senior year. And then I went to Virginia's Fayetteville State University for my first year in college. Stayed down there, met some great folks, decided to come home, went to VCU, met some great people there, Virginia Commonwealth University. And that is where, I got into the work that I do today. I started getting into, I was a business major that went into psychology major, a minor in psychology, majored in, ended up majoring in psychology. Fun fact, I almost failed and flunked out of college. A lot of people don't believe that, but I had a 1.8 after transferring into VCU. And so I was always an AB student all through K through 12, honor roll student, even graduated from high school for 3.2, 3.3. And that was because I was trying to challenge myself and take, AP courses and stuff like that, advanced courses, because I thought it looked good on my resume or looked good on my transcript before I was applying for colleges. Don't work with that no more. So I went to VCU. I went to Fayetteville State, still maintaining 3.0. And when I got to VCU, a lot of things changed, right? Class sizes changing. Teacher student ratio was 1 to 25. Now it's 1 to 200 or 1 to 150, 1 to 100. And we're using clickers to do attendance. But VCU exposed me to a lot of different cultures, a lot of diversity, learning about people's different experiences. I was this young boy from Carolina County with only a limited amount of cultural diversity and cultural experience. And so that did help shape my I would say my understanding of the world and diversity in that aspect. So I majored in psychology, and I had my own challenges along the way down there. Like I said, I almost got kicked out of school. I was working, trying to keep money up. My parents was going through a separation that ended up turning into a divorce. I had my own relationship problems, things like that. But along this whole entire time, that's where I discovered psychology. I was very interested in understanding why people behave the way they do. So I did that, and I also ventured into social work 101 class. And that is where I learned about social work. Didn't know nothing about it, never knew a social worker. And when I finished with my psychology degree, I said, okay, I want to, do something outside of, this. I want to get my master's, of course. It's a business. I wanted to get an MBA. That shifted. And so I went and graduated psychology, didn't want to do clinical counseling psychology, ended up doing social work and got my master's in social work. Forgot to even apply for VCU social work program, where at the time was a top social work program, and then went to George Mason. And George Mason is now one of the top social work programs in the nation. And so that was a good experience there. And before that, I started working in mental health and psychiatric inpatient, got some knowledge, started looking at the gaps of inpatient, having conversations with clients, patients at the time, about what was going on in the mental health system, learned about the mental health system, and said, okay, I wanted to do something about it, and then did social work. I did a lot of things in social work prior to that. I was working, I was interning, I was commuting almost an hour and a half one way to get this master's in social work degree. And that is where I started to understand, I might have been dealing with depression. I might have been overworking myself, things like that. So when I ended up graduating and got into crisis therapy, right, and I did crisis therapy for 3.5 years, and on to do substance use and on to do private practice. Those are the times where I started really understanding and learning myself. I got married, met my beautiful wife, had my daughter first year after graduation. She's now 9, and then ended up having my son years later, who is before actually this May, which is wild to think about. So I'm a husband and father, devout Christian. I'm a deacon at my church, and I'm also a young adult leader of my ministry. And so, all these different elements make me. I've had my share, like even during grad school, I had my share of mental health challenges that even whether I want to acknowledge them or not, they were there. They were also there undergrad. And they also carry over, because once you become a husband and once you get married and you become a dad, things shift. But I enjoy being a husband. I enjoy being a dad. Those things keep me on my toes, and I'm always constantly learning and trying to be a better man in those spaces. During those times where transitions happen, that was where I had to go into a space of self-discovery, learning more about myself, who I wanted to be outside of the titles of husband and father. I knew the element and version of myself, who I was prior to that, which was this basketball player, this car guy, this sneakerhead, this guy that's laid back and, does speak up, love to help people, love to want to see people do good, and want to see people, be happy. Right. And so, but in that space of those things, the elements I want to see for other people, I was able to name that, but I wasn't able to name it for myself at times. And that's where, I always tell people parenting, will expose the things that you haven't worked on yourself. And I will also say working in a marriage does the same thing, because a lot of times the people think that it's our partners or our spouses that, are having an issue. But a lot of times we have to deal with the things that we haven't dealt with first, because that comes out how we pour into our marriage or how we treat our spouse and loved one. So going to therapy, my faith, my relationship, my bishop, my church family, my wife and support, her family support, my mom and dad supporting, just really, really helping me along the healing journey, and my friends, and, grief, loss, managing my mental health, but learning about myself and that same conversation and that same point in time. So many conversations I've had with my wife about myself, my upbringing, and who I am and who I want to be and what that looks like. She'll be the first one to tell you how hard I am on myself in that space, right? And so, but I love to help. I love to see people, growing and being better, right? But again, sometimes we're our own worst critic, and we also we don't always practice what we preach. So, anyways, I wrote a few books as well. One about black mental health, and then also a self-help book about my own mental health journey and grief and loss, right? And when I talk about grief and loss, I said on the last podcast episode, I've lost, countless loved ones. And I lost countless loved ones for a 5-6 year period between me and my wife, which 2018 probably being the toughest year of grief and loss. Losing both my grandmothers in like a 4 to 5 month, section. During that, I had to really learn about, emotions, right? And the deep emotions of grief, loss, depression, sadness, loneliness, and then also like a shell of myself, right? A shell of when I say loneliness, a shell of what I used to be and what I'm evolving and transitioning to be. Somebody asked me once at a conference, and they said, how do you get to the point of being so confident in yourself, or trusting in yourself, and showing up as your authentic self in these spaces that you operate in, which could be white spaces at time. And I said that, what I'm saying, I've learned me. I'm comfortable with me, and I've also explored who I am mentally, professionally, emotionally, financially. I've explored these aspects, and I'm also still learning and growing. So I'm allowing myself to grow and learn. But this is my version of myself that I shown up as my authentic self has been cultivated, for years. And I've dared to be different, dared to be bold, dared to, like access and buck the system, try the system in different ways. And it's worked out for me. It's also been fearful. It's also been anxiety driven, but we made it happen. And, that is how, but also that's also from a long time and years of some pain, struggle, sadness, depression, anxiety, guilt, shame, self-esteem issues, you name it. So at the age of 35, 35 going forward, because I feel like 35 was my really big shifter in how I view and see myself. But after that fact, man, like, after all those things that have happened, that has shaped who I am as a person. And that also has said, this is who I am as a person. It's how I'm going to show up. I'm comfortable with this version of myself. I want to be this version of myself. And nobody's going to really change that, in that space. And it starts from these different elements. So so all that to say, I became a social worker, became a licensed clinical social worker, became a supervisor, did private practice, worked in private practice for about 3 or 4 years, and did that during the pandemic, which was a whirlwind. I talk about that in one of the business episodes. And learning how to market, learning how to create relationships during the pandemic, setting up these virtual spaces, creating virtual relationships with folks that I probably just started meeting just last year, face to face, and then really ushering into this new era of mental health, new space of social work. And that has prompted me to, continue to build relationships, but also look at technology and social work, AI and social work, non-traditional interventions on how to meet people where they're at, or also updated interventions on trying to help people, because some of our interventions that we use are dated. And so, that's where I kind of land at. And so even now as a doctoral student, I'm a doctoral student doctoral candidate for a DSW degree at University of Kentucky in my administration and leadership concentration, where I'm looking at addressing mental health needs of Southern rural Black men from an Afrocentric framework. And so that's because of my passion, all the work that I've done in the community. I've held men's groups, I've held men's mental health groups, barbershop talks, men's groups on academic settings, men's groups in different organizational settings, you name it. That is what I have been heavily focused on for the last 5 to 10 years is Black male mental health, and the mental health of the Black community as well. And so as this is also culminated of just not just research experience, but also lived experience, having the conversations from with guys from ages, kids, adolescents, all the way up into 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. Having a conversation with my grandfathers, my uncles, my dad, his friends, the church, members in the church, seasoned saints, things like that, man. And just, I want private practice, guys in private practice that I work with. I had a private practice that worked with Black men and women. So I enjoy that element of doing that work in those different settings and understanding how to address those mental health needs of Black men. We've been a historically marginalized and oppressed group. We have not been leaned on specifically, and I think there's tons of ideas that needs to go forward in helping those individuals. So that's a little bit of my research, my experience, my background. I'm also a podcaster. As you can see, I've been podcasting since 2016, 2017. A lot of folks don't know. I've been podcasting for quite some time. My first episode was the Backwoods podcast with my cousin, my homeboy, my wife, talking about pop culture, things like that. And in that space of, element sports, things like that, you name it. Right. And so 1 second, real quick. Can I pause this? All right. So had a brief intermission. So a lot of folks don't know I've been podcasting since 2017. I've had a few different podcasts. One that the Backwoods podcast was my first initial podcast. Then I did some collaborative episodes with folks. I was flirting with different ideas of podcasting. And I initially moved into like the single space of podcasting around 2017, 2018, maybe. Podcast by Trey that evolved to Everybody Relax. And Everybody Relax was my main name. And that actually was moving forward podcasting wise. But there was a trademark infringement, copyright infringement that I didn't know that another podcast had already had that name. So I had to change all of my stuff from Everybody Relax to the G.Taylor Show. So I think, too, that's also the piece. A lot of folks know my podcast from Everybody Relax because I think it was very successful throughout the pandemic and having the viewership and listenership. Once I shifted to the G.Taylor Show, I think, and then I stopped podcasting, as much as frequently as I was because Everybody Relax was very frequent. But a G.Taylor Show shifted, brand recognition, name, that thing changed a little bit. And so I'm rebuilding that again. So some folks have been there from Everybody Relax and Backwoods podcast, and some folks are very new to the G.Taylor Show. So, but the G.Taylor Show is pretty much everything I've always wanted to do, incorporating all of my experiences and my hobbies, whether that's sneakers, social work, mental health, cars, coffee, content, you name it. That's what it's about. I used to do interviews as well, where I would interview mental health professionals, social workers in the game, and kind of highlight what they do. Heavy on that for a while. That was also a big push to get my work out there as well. But that was on the Everybody Relax podcast, different More to My Credentials series. You can always go look it up. It's still there. It's just not under Everybody Relax. So at some point, I will get back to interviews. I just have not had the time to wrangle a schedule to get interviewees on. So you'll see the content now pretty much, what you're seeing today, which is the things I'm interested in that involve social work, mental health, men's mental health, Black men's mental health, my research, my hobbies and interests, you'll see all of that. The only content I haven't really copped on here just yet is coffee content and car content, because I'm trying to figure out a setup to do my car stuff and my coffee content, because I want to make sure my angles and everything is right. But I do have, right now, my two main cars are Beamers, BMWs. I have a 330 that 330i 05 E46 that I'm still rebuilding and working on. It is on the road. I do need to do some more work to it to get it straight. But my daily driver right now is a 2016 X5. And that is my road warrior at this point. And so those are my cars that I typically work on and mess with and when I got time. But usually I don't have enough time. So we'll get to that. I had a car company before I even had a Uphold, which is my business, which is my main business, was my private practice, my consulting business now. But before that, I was a prior business owner around car customization. It was called Redline Society. So this isn't my first business. It's my second, third business. Redline Society was a car customization business where we did tinted windows, car audio. We did this thing called Plasti Dip, which is like a rubber alternative to change your paint color. A lot of folks see the wraps. That's one element that you can do, but we did a thing where you can spray on. Looks like a wrap, but you can just peel it off. Same thing with a regular wrap, but a vinyl wrap. But this was a paint alternative. It was a rubber alternative you can spray onto a car. So, I've had various lives. I did a lot of different things in my last 37 years of life, but that's a little bit about me. So I can speak to the entrepreneurship. I can speak to marketing. I can speak to social media management on both fronts, on different fronts, from business side, from social work side, from mental health side, from, things like that. So, all those different elements make up who I am as a person and how I got to this level. So the G.Taylor Show is all about those different elements. You'll see these different themes throughout the actual the episodes that come out and drop. If you have questions, comments, or want to hear something specific, please let me know. But I just wanted to reintroduce myself as well about the work that I do, the content that's going to live here at the G.Taylor Show, and a little bit about me as a person if you came in on the later end of this podcast journey. All right. So listen, man, I hope that you have an amazing week. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Let me know what you think. Would love to partner and collaborate with different brands, whether that's social work brands, mental health brands, sneaker brands, streetwear brands, wellness brands. If you need a speaker, if you need a facilitator, if you need a podcaster, interviewee, if you need a researcher, if you need any of those and those things with your brand, agency, or organization, please let me know. Reach out. We can set something up and talk business. But yeah, that's a little bit about everything I'm about, how I bring all that to the table here, man. All right. Take care. Have a great week. We'll talk soon.